Thank you for hosting this dinner. What a marvelous community. I have met so many of you, and I am amazed. I am blown away at the great work that the UJIA has done in the Galil, in the north, and all over Israel. It's really quite remarkable. But I love events like this for a very personal reason. It was an event just like this 34 years ago at which I met my wife, Carolyn, who is here tonight. She now, of course, is a Lion of Judah and very active along with me in so many Jewish causes. We live in strange times. We live in the best of times and in the most dangerous of times. For the Jewish community in your country and mine, and for the Israeli community, in some ways, this is the best of times. We are a strong community, an affluent community, a generous community, an influential community. There are people among us who are poor, and we treat them well. I love the phrase of the prior lawyer saying that Israel has put an end to the concept of the Jewish refugee. It's a marvelous term, and thank you, I will borrow it with attribution. But we are stronger than ever. Israel is a strong nation. It's among the strongest nations in the world today. It has enormous deterrent power and other military power. It is a startup nation. It is the envy of the world in many ways. That's the good news. Why is it so dangerous? We live in a dangerous time because we're seeing the growth of extremism all over the world. My wife and my daughter and I just came back from a visit to Poland, to Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary, and we were appalled at what we saw. We saw the end of a 70-year moratorium against anti-Semitism in parts of Europe. For 70 years since the end of the Shoah, it was unacceptable to express overtly anti-Semitic views. Sure, you can hide them behind anti-Zionism, but nonetheless, it was an important symbolic statement that nobody would express anti-Semitic views. That's over in parts of Eastern Europe today. That's over in Greece today. And tragically, that may be over in elements of the Labor Party in this country today. We are seeing the growth of extremism on the right and also on the left. We are seeing the growth of populism now. What's wrong with populism? We believe in democracy. Populism can be very, very dangerous. Untrammeled democracy, unchecked by parliamentary or checks and balances systems, can result in the election of people who are temporarily popular, but who pose great dangers to liberty and to progress. Our American system of constitutional law was not designed for efficiency. We have a system of checks and balances, 3 independent branches of government. It was designed to prevent tyranny. And populism can sometimes trump institutional constraints on tyranny. As a Jewish community, we should be frightened by extremism on both sides. The history of the Jewish people has been a history of being caught between the black and the red, the black of fascism and the red of communism. Too many Jews over time have been tempted by the claims of social progress of communism and the hard left, only to be stabbed in the back by Stalin and others. We thrive at the center. We thrive when there are no extremes. And we have thrived in the post-war period because the post-war period has been a period of centrism in most parts of the world, in most parts of Europe, and in the United States of America. I see danger in a creeping radicalism in many parts of the world. In my country, it was manifested by the unpredictable success of 2 populist candidates, one of whom secured the nomination of his party. And believe me, tonight we're not going to talk about politics. I just want to describe some institutional changes. The success of Donald Trump in securing the Republican nomination, and the success of Senator Sanders in almost securing the Democratic nomination, coming from nowhere based on his populism and, some might say, his extremism. The success of Corbyn in this country, although it will not prove to be an ultimate success electorally, nonetheless manifests some changes in a very important institution of this country, namely the Labor Party, which for so many years stood together with Israel, with people like Tony Blair at its head and so many others. In fact, for many years, the Labor Party was, if anything, more supportive of Israel. How things have changed in the United States as well. The Democratic Party historically was always more supportive of Israel than the Republicans. Today, that has changed. And there are elements within the Democratic Party, like elements within the Labor Party, that would abandon Israel and that would reject Israel. We see extremists on the left in many movements, like the Black Lives Movement, which certainly proposes some very important improvements in the relationship between the police and African Americans, something that needs improvement. But then they created a platform, and in their platform, they singled out one country in the world, calling it genocidal and calling it apartheid. That one country was the nation state of the Jewish people. How dare they apply that double standard to the only democracy in the Middle East? And the reason I think the problem may be getting worse is because it really originates on university campuses today. On university campuses today, from Oxford to Cambridge to London to you name it, to Harvard to Yale to Princeton to Stanford, we're seeing a growing intolerance toward the nation state of the Jewish people. And on an academic level, we're seeing a growing unwillingness to engage in nuanced discussion about the Middle East. I want to change Harvard's motto from truth to nuance. I'm frightened of truth. Truth is something that people think they own, and there's only one of. The right thinks it owns the truth. The left thinks it owns the truth. Both have become intolerant of dissenting views. Why do we have this intolerance on university campuses from the hard left? Why do we have the demand for safe spaces, for trigger warnings, for prohibitions on microaggressions? It's because the left doesn't think you need to have conversations about issues that they are absolutely certain about. They own the truth. The truth shall not set you free. The truth will lead to tyranny. The recognition that truth is a subject that must be continually argued about and debated in calibrated, nuanced ways is what sets a university free to change and to improve. And the manifestation of this most recently has been, of course, the despicable boycott, divestment, sanction movement, the BDS movement. There is no BDS movement. Let me tell you that right now. There is no BDS movement. A movement is something that is directed universally. There is only a BDS attack against Israel. No other country is subject to a movement of BDS. I would not have as strong as opposition to BDS if the BDS movement said, let's rank every country in the world by reference to two criteria. Which are the worst offenders of human rights, and in which countries is there the least ability to protest within the democratic system, within the judicial system? And if those two criteria were employed, Israel would be 198th on a list of 200 countries, maybe 200th on the list. But now Israel is not only first on the list, it's the only country on the list. So much for the BDS movement. It's a fraud. It has nothing to do with a movement. It has nothing to do with ending the occupation. It has nothing to do with ending the settlements. It has everything to do with ending the peace process. It has everything to do with eliminating any possibility of a two-state solution. The founders of the BDS movement are very open about it. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution. And they want that one state to be Palestine. And they want their state to be a secular democratic state. Right. Really, can you count on a new Muslim Arab state being a secular democratic state? How's that worked out for you? That has not worked out very well in any part of the Middle East. And so the BDS movement fails on college campuses in the United States at one level. No university campus has adopted BDS. One tried, a small college called Hampshire. And I wrote to the president and I said, if you divest from Israel, we will divest from you. We will lead a campaign to get every donor to stop contributing. And he called back and basically on his hands and knees pleaded with us not to do that because it would bankrupt the school. And let me tell you right here and now, we will bankrupt any school that divests from Israel. We will use our economic power. We will use the power of alumni. We will not allow Israel to be boycotted or divested from on any major university. And we will succeed. But we are failing on the ultimate mission of BDS, because the ultimate mission of BDS in the United States is not to have divestment from Israel. They know that will fail. It's to miseducate a generation of future American leaders. It's to convey to young college students, my grandchildren, their friends, the claim that Israel is the worst human rights offender in the world. And it has people like Noam Chomsky saying that, the leading intellectual in the world today, calling Israel among the worst human rights offenders in the world. And so the real goal of the BDS movement is malpractice in education. And we have to fight it. We have to fight falsity with honesty. We have to fight myths with facts. And that's what we're trying to do. And I have to tell you, we can beat BDS. Even in Great Britain, I have a story of my own. About a year ago, less than a year ago, 10 months ago, I got a call from the Oxford Union asking me to come and debate against BDS. And the head of the Oxford Union said, you will not win this debate. We have to be honest with you. We've had 30 or 40 debates involving Israel at Oxford, and the Israel side has never won. You won't win this debate, but you might be able to influence a few people. And I said, I accept. And I'd like to debate the head of the BDS movement, Barghouti. And they said, fine. He responded by saying, I won't debate Dershowitz. He is subject to boycott, divestment, sanction. But he's not an Israeli. Well, that doesn't matter. He's a Zionist. So I am now subject of the boycott movement. So they got another woman who said she would debate me, but the BDS movement prohibited her from doing it. And so they put up a very distinguished and very eminent person to debate against me, Peter Tatchell. Many of you know him, one of the heads of the human rights movement, an honorable, honest man who opposes Israel. And we had the debate. And I decided to spend 5 minutes of my 20 minutes simply going over facts for the students, telling them how many times the Palestinians has been offered the state of their own. Peel Commission 1938, UN 1948, 1967, 2000, 2001, 2008. The students sat there with their mouths open. They had never heard these facts. They were shocked. They thought that Israel had always refused to permit any kind of a Palestinian state. And by the end of the debate, we won the vote overwhelmingly. And it wasn't my debating talents, it was just the facts. We were surprised. We were very surprised. But we had underestimated the open-mindedness and intelligence of students. If students are propagandized every day with the falsity and they hear facts, they are open-minded. And we have to not give up. We have to continue to fight for the truth as a nuance. The truth, look, there are two sides to every issue. There are claims that the Palestinians make that are legitimate. When I try to defend Israel, I don't make what's called the 100% case. I don't represent this government. I don't represent this prime minister. I represent the nation of Israel, and I make what I call the 80% case. The core case representing what virtually all Israelis agree to and what virtually all supporters of Israel agree to, not getting into the weeds about specific differences, which in a democracy are inevitable, and thank goodness for that. Would you want a country where everybody agreed? It might be called Iran, or it might be called China, or it might be called the former Soviet Union. But don't expect the nation state of the Jewish people to have agreement on all fundamental issues. All we demand is a single standard. All we demand is justice. We don't want people to support Israel out of pity or out of response to the Holocaust. That's not the argument. The argument is for a single standard of justice. Judge Israel the way you judge every other country. And when the Methodist Church in London or the Presbyterian Church in the United States singles out one country and tries to have symbolic protests showing checkpoints, Let them spend their time focusing on what's going on in Syria, what's going on in many parts of Africa, what's going on with the occupation of Tibet in China, what's going on with the denial of statehood to the Kurdish people. Don't leave out Israel if you believe that warrants inclusion, but don't focus only on Israel. Look, if you're an Israeli, you can apply a double standard to your own country. I apply a double standard to my own country. If you're an Arab or a Palestinian, I can understand focusing on Israel. But if you're a British Methodist, if you are an American Presbyterian, you have no right to single out Israel and apply a double standard to that country. And we should call them on that every time they do it. Look, we have a tradition, and we have a mixed tradition. During the Shoah, many people believed that the Jewish people would prevail by its higher morality. Martin Buber had an exchange with Mahatma Gandhi, and Gandhi refused to stand up for the Jewish people. He refused to ask the British government to open up its gates to Palestine, which would have saved hundreds of thousands of Jews. He said, no, if Jews have a higher morality, let them lie down in front of the Nazi trucks and let the world see their higher morality. Well, the Shoah taught us a lesson. Morality without strength will not permit the survival of the Jewish people. The Jewish people not only need strength, they need greater strength than any other people. The psalmist put it well when he said, Hashem oz li'amo yitain, Hashem yivarech et amo b'shalom. God will give the Jewish people strength, and only from strength will there come peace. Only way to peace in the Middle East is a strong Israel, an Israel that's invincible and capable of defeating all of its enemies. And we, the Jewish communities around the world, must use our strength. Let me tell you a story. About 4 years ago, I received the greatest honor of my life. Benjamin Netanyahu asked me if I would become Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. I could have imagined no job which I would have enjoyed more. Going to that place of falsehood and being able to argue Israel's case. Wow, it would have made my life. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I'm an American, and I thought it would raise issues of dual loyalty among Americans. Also, there are many, many distinguished Israelis, and of course the two Israeli ambassadors to the United Nations, Ron Prosor and the current ambassador, have done incredibly distinguished jobs, just like Israel's ambassador to England does a phenomenal job. Bibi's a hard guy to say no to. And he asked me to come and have dinner with him before I said no, and I had dinner with him alone for 4 hours, and he twisted my arm, and he twisted, and he twisted. Finally, he realized I really couldn't do it. He said, Alan, I need you to do something else for me. I said, okay, I'll do something else. He said, I want you to become Israel's ambassador to the diaspora, or among Israel's ambassadors, because there are many. I want you to help strengthen the American Jewish community and other Jewish communities, because those weapons, the weapon of British Jewry, of French Jewry, of American Jewry, are as important as Iron Dome. And I committed myself to doing that. And that's why I'm here tonight. I'm here tonight to urge you to use your political power, to use your moral power, to use your academic power, to use your economic power. Speak out for Israel. You earned that right. You, British Jewry, have contributed disproportionately to the greatness of this country. You have nothing to be apologetic about. You have every right to stand up for what you think is right and justice. And not only do you have that right, I believe you have that obligation. And I think we need strong support. And I think you can help provide it. Also, we must have a strong Jewish identity. We must not worry about charges that we will be unduly loyal to the nation state of Israel and disloyal to our own country. You are loyal subjects of Britain, and you show your loyalty all the time. We must reject litmus tests that are imposed on the Jewish community. At college campuses today, many Jewish students are told if they want to be liberals, if they want to support the environment, if they want to support gay rights, if they want to support women's rights, if they want to support transgender rights, they have to reject Israel. No, we will reject that litmus test. We will not join Black Lives Matter. We will help Black Lives Matter, but we will create our own organizations that help Black Lives Matter without hurting the Jewish community and without libeling the nation state of the Jewish people. We have built civil rights movements before, and we will do it again. We will not accept the statements of many of them Jewish opponents of Israel, for example, in the gay rights movement, who say that what Israel does, yes, it's positive toward the gay community, but it's pinkwashing. What it does is it's good for the gay community in order to pinkwash, cover up the bad stuff it's doing to the Palestinian community. No, we reject that. It's good for the gay community because it believes in human rights. It believes that human beings are created in the image of God. And it believes that all human beings have inherent value. It doesn't do it for any external purpose. That's the essence of anti-Semitism. The essence of anti-Semitism is to say that everything Jews do good must have a bad motive. Everything Jews do positively must be explainable by negative considerations. We have to reject that. We have to reject efforts to pigeonhole us and to make us choose between the values we hold dear in terms of the rights of others and the values we hold dear in terms of our own state. Im ein ani li mili, as Hillel said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am for myself alone, what am I? We have learned to live with that duality. There is nothing inconsistent with that duality. So, I'm an optimist. Now, let me explain to you, in Israel, the term optimist and pessimist have very different meanings. In Israel, a pessimist is somebody who says things are so terrible they can't get any worse, and an optimist is one who says, yes, they can. Now, I am not that kind of an optimist. I am a real optimist. And why am I an optimist? Because I look out and I see you, and I see this community, and I speak to communities like this all over the world, and you cause me to be optimistic. And I hope tonight, when the appeal comes and you're asked to make substantial sacrifices, that you will do so, that you will show me my optimism is justified. A week ago, Shabbos, was the 65th anniversary of my bar mitzvah. And my grandmother would have said it's bashert. What was my bar mitzvah, Sedra? Shoftim, judges. What is the most important phrase in the parsha of Shoftim? Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, which is mistranslated as justice, justice, shall you pursue. No, tirdof means chase after. The struggle for justice never stays won. It's a process. We always chase after it. It always changes. It always gets ahead of it. And the rabbis, and I'm sure our rabbis here tonight, have multiple interpretations for why the Torah, which never repeats a word meaninglessly, why it says tzedek, tzedek. Why not just tzedek tirdof, justice shall you pursue? Why twice? And there are so many interpretations. In my law classes, I give an interpretation saying one tzedek is the substantive justice, one tzedek is procedural justice, one tzedek is justice, the other is rachmanut, compassion. For tonight, though, I want to give you a third interpretation, which I just thought of today, and I want to share it with you. Of course, the root of the word tzedakah is tzedek. And for us, tzedakah, charity, is not a gift, it's an obligation. On my first date with my wife, Carolyn, she said that she was then a graduate student at Boston University getting her PhD in psychology, and she was on a grant, and as part of the grant, she had to list her expenses. And among her contributions was $100 to the United Jewish Appeal. And the grant person struck it and said, no, 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 charity is a luxury, and you can't have luxuries on your grant. And Carolyn, on our first date, told me, she said, not in our tradition. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. How could I not have fallen in love with that woman? And so, for me, tzedek, tzedek explains something very important. To achieve justice, we need tzedakah. To achieve justice, we have to put our hands in our pockets, we have to open our wallets, and we have to give just charity. I don't mean just enough to get by. I mean charity that is just, charity that reflects not only what you can do, but the needs of the community. And the needs of the community have never been greater. And so I know you will contribute deeply in your pockets. I know you will continue to support Israel. I know that you will continue to instill Jewish values in your children and your grandchildren. And that's why I'm so optimistic. May you all go from strength to strength. Thank you and good night.